Welcome to the Real Crime Diary Daily Dose of Crime. I'm your host, MHB. Picture this. A hushed courtroom, the air thick with tension. All eyes are on one woman, Sarah, as she takes the stand. Her hands tremble, but her eyes burn with determination. Across the room, James Thompson, her alleged abuser, sits stone-faced. This is the moment that could change everything. Will Sarah's voice be heard? Can her testimony bring a powerful man to justice? Today, we dive into a case that exposes the dark underbelly of domestic abuse and the courage it takes to speak out. Let me take you back to the beginning. I'm MHB, and I've been covering this high-profile case for the Real Crime Diary. The courtroom was electric with tension as Sarah, the accuser, sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor. Across the room, James Thompson, the defendant, a successful businessman known for his charm and philanthropy, maintained a stoic facade. Sarah's journey to this moment had been long and painful. For years, she'd kept her story hidden, afraid of the consequences of speaking out. But today, that was about to change. The air felt thick with anticipation as everyone waited for her testimony to begin. As I looked around, I could see the mix of emotions on the faces of those present. Some were skeptical, others supportive, but all were eager to hear what Sarah had to say. This wasn't just another trial. It was a moment that could potentially reshape how our society views and handles domestic abuse cases. As Sarah took her place on the witness stand, you could feel the air in the courtroom grow thick with anticipation. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, finally settling on her hands, which trembled slightly as she placed them in her lap. The judge's voice, usually authoritative, seemed gentler as he swore her in. Sarah's first words were barely audible, a stark contrast to the confident woman I'd interviewed just days before. But as she continued, her voice gained strength, each word seeming to lift a weight from her shoulders. The jury leaned forward, hanging on every syllable. Even the usually stoic bailiff seemed moved by her palpable courage. As Sarah recounted the early days of her relationship with Thompson, I couldn't help but notice the change in her demeanor. The fear in her eyes was gradually replaced by a fierce determination. This wasn't just another testimony. It was a moment of reckoning, not only for Thompson, but for a society that too often turns a blind eye to abuse. Sarah's words were breaking years of silence, and you could sense that everyone in that courtroom knew they were witnessing something profound. As Sarah's testimony unfolded, the courtroom hung on her every word. Her voice, initially trembling, grew stronger as she recounted the horrific details of the abuse she had endured. "It started with small things," Sarah explained, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance. "James would criticize my appearance, my cooking, even the way I breathed. I thought it was just stress from his job." The jury leaned forward, their expressions a mix of concern and disbelief. Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then came the physical abuse. The first time he hit me, he apologized profusely. He swore it would never happen again, but it did, again and again." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. I saw one juror cover her mouth in shock, while another clenched his fist tightly. Sarah's voice cracked as she described the escalating violence. "He would fly into rages over the smallest things. Once he threw me against a wall because I forgot to buy his favorite cereal. Another time he held my head underwater in the bathtub until I nearly passed out. He said it was to teach me a lesson." The prosecutor gently asked Sarah to show the court some of her scars. With shaking hands, she rolled up her sleeve, revealing a series of burn marks. "He did this with his cigar," she explained, her voice hollow. "Said he was marking his property." By now, several members of the jury were openly weeping. Even the usually stoic judge appeared visibly shaken. Sarah's testimony painted a vivid picture of a life lived in constant fear. She described sleepless nights, walking on eggshells, and the crushing weight of isolation, as James systematically cut her off from friends and family. "The worst part," Sarah said, her voice suddenly strong and clear, "was feeling like I had no way out. He convinced me that no one would believe me, that I was worthless without him. It took years for me to realize that wasn't true." As Sarah finished recounting her ordeal, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. The weight of her words hung in the air, a testament to the courage it took to break her silence and confront her abuser. As Sarah's initial testimony concluded, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. The defense attorney rose, his eyes glinting with determination. This was the moment of truth, the cross-examination. Sarah straightened her back, meeting the lawyer's gaze head-on. You could see the resolve etched on her face, a stark contrast to her earlier nervousness. The questions came rapid fire, each one designed to poke holes in her story. Ms. Johnson, isn't it true that you continued to live with Mr. Thompson for months after the alleged incidents? The lawyer asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Sarah didn't flinch. Yes, she replied steadily, because I was terrified of what would happen if I left. Throughout the grueling examination, Sarah remained composed. She answered each question thoughtfully, her voice growing stronger with each response. Even when the questions became personal and probing, she didn't waver. At one point, the defense attorney attempted to paint her as an unreliable witness. You didn't report these alleged incidents immediately. Why should the jury believe you now? Sarah paused, taking a deep breath. Her eyes flickered briefly to James Thompson before returning to the lawyer. Because living in fear is no longer an option for me, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. I'm here to reclaim my truth, no matter how long it took me to find the courage. As the cross-examination continued, it became clear that Sarah's resolve was unshakable. Her strength in the face of such intense scrutiny was nothing short of remarkable. The tension in the courtroom was electric as we awaited the jury's decision. You could hear a pin drop as the foreman stood, holding that small piece of paper that would change lives forever. Sarah sat rigid, her eyes fixed on the jury box, while Thompson's face remained an impassive mask. We, the jury, find the defendant, James Thompson, guilty on all counts. The words hung in the air for a split second before the courtroom erupted. Sarah's shoulders sagged with relief, tears streaming down her face as she turned to embrace her supporters. It was as if years of pent-up fear and pain were finally released in that moment. Thompson, on the other hand, seemed to crumple in his seat. The color drained from his face as the reality of the verdict sank in. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, but Thompson shrugged it off, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. As the judge called for order, I couldn't help but feel we'd just witnessed a pivotal moment in the fight against domestic abuse. Sarah's courage had not only brought her justice, but had given hope to countless others. The verdict sent shockwaves through the community. As Sarah emerged from the courthouse, a sea of reporters surged forward, microphones outstretched. Her voice, once silenced by fear, now rang out clear and strong. This isn't just about me, Sarah declared, her eyes shining with determination. It's about every person who's ever felt trapped, afraid to speak up. Today, we've shown that your voice matters. Your story deserves to be heard. Within hours, social media exploded with support. Believe Survivors trended nationwide as thousands shared their own stories of survival and hope. Domestic violence hotlines reported a surge in calls, with many citing Sarah's courage as their inspiration to seek help. The impact rippled through society. Lawmakers pledged to review and strengthen domestic violence legislation. Schools and workplaces began implementing new awareness programs. Sarah's bravery had sparked a movement, turning one woman's testimony into a catalyst for change. Sarah's bravery in that courtroom didn't just end with a verdict. It sparked a movement that continues to ripple through our society today. In the months following the trial, we've seen a surge in domestic violence awareness campaigns and support for survivors. Legislators have taken notice too, with several states pushing for stronger laws to protect victims and hold abusers accountable. But perhaps the most profound change has been in our communities. People are talking about domestic violence openly, shattering the silence that once shrouded this issue. Support groups report record attendance, and workplaces are implementing new policies to protect employees facing abuse at home. Sarah's voice became a catalyst for change, proving that one person's courage can transform countless lives. But the work isn't over. We all have a role to play in ending domestic violence. So I ask you, what will you do to support survivors in your community? How can you use your voice to break the cycle of abuse? Remember, change starts with each of us. By speaking up, supporting survivors, and challenging abusive behavior, we can create a safer world for everyone. This is MHB reminding you that your voice matters. Use it wisely, use it bravely. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered.